There's a new beat in town. Welcome to Bullet and Flight Music Store, your premier spot for music, books, and one-of-a-kind novelties. Looking to treat yourself or find a unique gift for the music lover in your life? We make it easy. In fact, you can start your collection today for as low as 44 cents. That's right, world-class finds for less than a cup of coffee. Visit us online at bulletinflightmusic.myshopify.com. Plus, keep the conversation going 24/7 with Bullet in Flight Radio on Podbean. Bullet in Flight. Find your rhythm, find your soul.
The prophets speak, but not your truth. They soothe the conscience, ease the proof. Peace, peace, they chant with silver tongue, while sin runs deep and hearts are numb. A bandage on a cancerous wound. No cry for change, no call to repent. Just hollow words when all is rent. Peace, peace, they say, but there is none. No peace for those who scorn your son. The world gives comfort, soft and light, but you give grace and truth and light. Not as the world gives, no. Your peace is bought by blood and bread. One is alive, the other real. Superficial healing versus God's true peace. The priests are greedy and great to small. The leaders love the world's applause. They silence seers, they block the word, and say, don't trouble us, oh Lord. Like cancer masked with friendly lies, they trade your holiness for ease. A gospel cheap, a crossless peace. There is none. No peace for those who scorn your son. The world gives comfort, soft and light, but you give grace and truth and light. Not as the world gives, no, instead your peace is bought by blood and bread. One is alive, We can find the ancient way where broken hearts are made to stay. Come, says the Lamb, take up your cross. Learn of my meekness, bear the loss. For justified by faith we stand. We have true peace with God at hand. The Spirit guards our soul and mind, a peace the world will never find. Peace, peace, they say, but there is none. No peace for those who scorn your Son. The world gives comfort, soft and light, but you give grace and truth and light. Not as the world gives, no, instead your peace is bought by blood and bread. One is alive, the other real. Superficial healing versus God's true peace. So stand at the crossroads, lift your eyes, ask where the old path truly lies. Not easy words, but costly grace. The way of holiness, the Savior's face. For rest is found when sins are slain and carried by the Prince of Peace. As A.W. Tozer said, it's not the absence of trouble, but the presence of God. Lord, guard us from deceptive ease. Expose each wound, each falsehood's breeze. We trade the world's fake peace for real. Your deep true peace, the soul's true heal. In Jesus' name we humbly plead. Let your true peace reign in word and deed.
For 40 years, Ravi Zacharias traveled the world as a Christian apologist, authoring more than 30 books and building a ministry that reached millions. By the time of his death, the organization had around 50 public ministry team members worldwide, with offices in 12 countries. In 2015, Zacharias and his wife earned a combined $523,926 from the ministry. He addressed audiences at Oxford, appeared alongside political leaders, and was praised as a defender of truth. But when he died of cancer on May 19, 2020, the real story was just beginning. 4 months after his death, Christianity Today published allegations by 3 anonymous sources that he sexually harassed them at 2 spas he co-owned. An independent investigation confirmed one of those accounts and found significant evidence of sexual misconduct, involving additional massage therapists. The phones revealed over 200 photographs of women. The devices contained evidence of romantic emails and text exchanges, and buried in financial records was a pattern that stretched back years. This wasn't about faith failing. It was about power concealing itself in plain sight. By the early 1980s, Ravi Zacharias had positioned himself as one of Christianity's most intellectual voices. In 1983, he spoke at the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association's International Conference for Itinerant Evangelists in Amsterdam. The following year, he founded Ravi Zacharias International Ministries in Toronto, with a mission described as reaching the intellectually resistant. Based in Atlanta, the organization trained and employed about 70 traveling evangelists around the world. He hosted the radio programs Let My People Think and Just Thinking. The brand was precision itself. Polished arguments, emotional appeals, intellectual credibility. His biography listed prestigious academic affiliations. Publishers described him as holding multiple doctorates. And for decades, audiences believed every word. The revenue model was equally impressive. The nonprofit grew substantially, generating millions annually through books, speaking fees, and international conferences. Every appearance reinforced the brand. A $45 million life insurance policy existed on Ravi Zacharias' life and was payable to RZIM, according to his son. Behind the lectures and broadcasts was operational infrastructure, staff salaries, international offices, production costs. The ministry even ventured into for-profit territory. Zacharias had business cards listing him as the owner of day spas and appeared at grand opening events. The ministry's relief arm, Wellspring International, was listed as a beneficiary of the for-profit business. The stated purpose was charitable. The reality would prove different. Zacharias convinced most of the world that he held 3 doctorates, was a former visiting scholar at Cambridge University, and was a professor at Oxford University. All 3 claims were completely false. He had absolutely no graduate degrees, yet he routinely referred to himself as Dr. Zacharias and spoke in venues where the title was understood to mean doctoral studies. Up until 2017, the RZIM bio had not used the phrase honorary doctorates. Instead, it stated he had been honored with the conferring of 6 doctoral degrees. The site also referred to him as Dr. Zacharias through 2014, as did multiple press releases. When questioned in 2015, the credentials quietly changed. The doctorate references diminished. The Cambridge claim shifted to Ridley Hall. But the public image remained intact, the brilliant apologist, trusted by millions. The crack came in spring 2017. Laurie Ann Thompson, a Canadian supporter of RZIM, accused Zacharias of spiritual abuse and sexting, alleging he had groomed her by pretending to minister to her and then asked her for nude photos and engaged her in explicit online conversation. Zacharias sued the woman, claiming extortion, and the matter was settled out of court under undisclosed terms. Zacharias required the Thompsons to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Before he died, Zacharias addressed the allegations in an 800-word public statement in December 2017. In that statement, he denied any sexually or romantically inappropriate conduct. He stood by that statement until his death. The ministry stood beside him. RZIM told Religion News Service, "We believe them to be false." The emails that Ravi sent to Laurie Ann were disqualifying in and of themselves. It was irresponsible for anyone to attempt to manipulate and control another person by threatening suicide. No man should ask the wife of another man to keep their communication a secret. Further, no one should consider such disclosure to be a betrayal. Both parties signed a non-disclosure agreement, but, Thompson said, Zacharias broke it almost immediately. Thompson was silenced. The public believed the official narrative. The ministry thought it best to trust Zacharias and focus on discrediting his accuser. After seeing the vicious way that Thompson was treated, other victims of Zacharias were discouraged from coming forward with their stories. Meanwhile, Zacharias continued traveling. The books continued selling. The reputation remained untarnished, at least publicly. In September 2020, Christianity Today published an article asserting that over a period of about 5 years, Zacharias sexually harassed 3 women who worked as massage therapists at 2 day spas he co-owned in an Atlanta suburb. RZIM's leadership initially challenged the claims, asserting that the allegations do not in any way comport with the man we knew for decades. We believe them to be false. But this time, pressure mounted. RZIM changed course and hired Miller and Martin in early October after several speakers said they found the allegations credible and demanded the ministry do a real and reputable investigation. The investigators interviewed more than 50 people, including more than a dozen massage therapists, and accessed data from 4 mobile devices used by Zacharias. By December, the interim findings were undeniable. On December 23, 2020, RZIM confirmed that the allegations were true and released a preliminary report from the investigation. The interim investigation update indicates this assessment of Ravi's behavior to be true, that he did indeed engage in sexual misconduct. This misconduct is deeply troubling and wholly inconsistent with the man Ravi Zacharias presented both publicly and privately to so many over more than 4 decades of public ministry. The full report arrived February 11, 2021. Zacharias's phones contained over 200 photographs of women much younger than him and dozens of photographs he took of himself. Zacharias used tens of thousands of dollars of ministry funds dedicated to a humanitarian effort to pay 4 massage therapists, providing them housing, schooling, and monthly support. One woman said that after he arranged for the ministry to provide her with financial support, he required sex from her. The theological critics had been raising questions for years. One caring Christian had asked simply, "If he lies about this, what else does he lie about?" Isn't one of the foremost Christian apologists being dishonest about the facts a serious issue? Isn't truth a core issue? Ravi Zacharias was exactly that person, who believed no barrier must prevent his success. All his supposedly wonderful apologetics efforts to present the Christian faith must come under scrutiny as fraudulent. But even earlier warnings were ignored. Many RZIM staff members told investigators that Zacharias had created an environment within the ministry that marginalized members for raising questions. When staff mentioned to him that certain behaviors could have the appearance of impropriety, Zacharias accused them of disloyalty and responded with rage. The pattern was methodical. The investigation confirmed that Zacharias lied about not being alone with a woman other than his wife or daughters. He also maintained multiple phones at all times, kept them on a different wireless plan than RZIM, and never used the wireless network at the office. Zacharias said this was for security, but it ensured his communication could not be monitored. Between 2010 and 2014, he spent a total of 256 days in one of 2 Bangkok apartments and sought rent reimbursement from RZIM for those stays. The other apartment, in the same building but on a different floor, housed one of his massage therapists. Investigators found Zacharias had 200 massage therapist contacts in the phones he used between 2014 and 2020. And still, RZIM leadership claimed ignorance. The employees said that Zacharias made people feel special when he spoke to them and valued their intellectual and spiritual lives. He asked the women about their professional aspirations and got them to talk about their personal background, including past relations, traumas, and abuse. Thompson claimed that Zacharias groomed her by engaging in spiritual conversations and encouraging her to confide in him about her history of abuse and trauma. According to the investigation, this was a common tactic Zacharias used to gain his victims' compliance. Zacharias made victims pray with him to thank God for the opportunity and called them his reward for living a life of service to God. He warned them that if they ever spoke out against him, they would be responsible for millions of souls lost when his reputation was damaged. What enabled this? Not a single failure, a system. The RZIM board stated, Ravi engaged in a series of extensive measures to conceal his behavior from his family, colleagues, and friends. However, we also recognize that in situations of prolonged abuse, there often exist significant structural, policy, and cultural problems. We were trusted by our staff, our donors, and the public to mentor, oversee, and ensure the accountability of Ravi Zacharias. And in this, we have failed. It took not just an evangelical village, but a vast evangelical empire to nurture, enable, and cover up for Ravi Zacharias. While Ravi lied for decades about his credentials, not a single Christian spoke out publicly. Zero. It fell to an atheist to complain that the evangelist had no clothes. The history of the modern American church is filled with examples of leadership failure and its chaotic effects. Ted Haggard, Bill Hybels, Perry Stone, Earl Polk, Jimmy Swaggart, Jim Baker, and Jerry Falwell Jr. The pattern repeated. Celebrity status, inadequate accountability, institutional protection, delayed consequences. The real battle was against this general lack of integrity on the part of Christian evangelical leadership. The evangelical industrial complex shamelessly nurtures a celebrity culture that puts butts on pews and bucks in the coffers. Ravi's growth as a deceiver and predator would never have happened if the evangelical industrial complex had valued integrity over brand success. But it didn't, and it doesn't. And that, not Ravi Zacharias as sleazy preacher, is the big story here. In early 2021, Indiana Wesleyan University removed Ravi Zacharias from the Society of World Changers. RZIM Africa suspended its operations, while RZIM itself scaled back its website. In March, RZIM stated it would alter its name and remove all material related to Zacharias. As a result of falling donations, RZIM decided to make significant workforce reductions worldwide and changed from running evangelists and apologists to making grants to other organizations supporting evangelism and the prevention of and caring for victims of sexual abuse. RZIM Canada began winding down operations. The empire was collapsing. But the deeper questions remained. Today, RZIM exists in a reduced form. The organization continues to exist, but with little transparency or accountability. RZIM still has a website, but no financial information or grant applications are posted there. RZIM's membership with the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability was terminated in 2021. The last informational Form 990 on file was for 2015. In 2016, it was granted the status of a church and exempted from filing. Neither does RZIM post any audited financial statements. Either of these documents would provide transparency into the revenue and expenditures of RZIM. Sarah Davis resigned from her role as CEO of RZIM in 2021, with plans to start a new organization, though it proved short-lived. The legacy question isn't complicated. It's painful. For 40 years, millions trusted a man who presented himself as a defender of truth, while systematically deceiving those closest to him. Both before and after his death in May 2020, multiple women alleged that Zacharias had engaged in habitual sexual misconduct and abuse. A 4-month investigation found the late Ravi Zacharias leveraged his reputation as a world-famous Christian apologist to abuse massage therapists in the United States and abroad over more than a decade, while the ministry led by his family members and loyal allies failed to hold him accountable. He used his need for massage and frequent overseas travel to hide his abusive behavior, luring victims by building trust through spiritual conversations and offering funds straight from his ministry. The institutions that elevated him failed. The systems that protected him enabled harm. And the victims he silenced are still seeking accountability. What fills the space where trust used to be? Share your thoughts below.
Hello everybody, this is Catrice from Cocktail Hour with Catrice, and you're listening to Bullet in Flight Radio, your story, our station, the best progressive Christian network in the world.
"10 years ago, Christian music filled stadiums and sold millions of compact discs. Today, its market share has crumbled to under 2%. Radio stations are vanishing, album sales have collapsed, and most artists cannot survive on streaming pennies. The industry's crash is not just financial, it is exposing a deeper identity crisis that threatens the future of faith-based music. What caused such a rapid and total collapse? Can anything survive when the foundation gives way? In the early 2000s, Christian music was riding high. In the first half of 2002, Christian and gospel album sales jumped 18% to 23.4 million units sold, even as the rest of the music industry shrank by nearly 10%. That brief surge masked deeper problems. By the end of the decade, the bottom fell out. Christian music's market share slid below 2%, and the decline has only accelerated since. Radio, once the backbone of the industry, became a battleground for survival. National networks like K-Love expanded aggressively, buying up struggling local stations across the country. Smaller independent Christian broadcasters could not compete with the scale and advertising muscle of these giants. Many disappeared entirely, taking with them the regional voices and diverse playlists that once defined Christian airwaves. The shift was not just about technology or taste, it was demographic. The core audience for Christian radio aged faster than the general population. Older listeners clung to their favorite stations, but younger generations moved on. As streaming platforms took over, the industry's reliance on physical album sales, including CDs, cassettes, even vinyl, became a liability. Christian music's audience was slower to adapt, and by the time streaming became dominant, the damage was done. With fewer albums sold and radio reach shrinking, revenue streams dried up. Power concentrated in the hands of a few national networks, who decided which songs and which artists would get airplay. For those on the outside, exposure became nearly impossible. The loss was not just financial, it was cultural. The gatekeepers now controlled the microphone. Streaming promised a lifeline, but the numbers do not add up for most Christian artists. On Spotify, a song needs millions of plays just to break 4 figures. The average payout per stream is around half a cent, sometimes less. For a mid-level artist, 1 million streams might mean a few $1,000s, before taxes, label cuts, and co-writer splits. That is not a living wage. The few with crossover hits survive. The rest face a math problem with no answer. Touring once filled the gap. Now, the circuit is shrinking. Festivals that anchored the calendar are vanishing. Ichthus, one of the longest-running Christian festivals, shut down in 2013. Soulfest, a staple in New England, held its last event in 2023. Dozens of smaller gatherings have disappeared, taking with them the stages where emerging acts built followings. Churches, too, have pulled back on hosting concerts, wary of costs and shrinking attendance. For many artists, the loss of live opportunities means the end of the road. There are fewer venues, fewer gigs, fewer fans willing or able to pay. The pipeline for new talent is drying up. Fewer young musicians are entering the scene, and even fewer can afford to stay. The industry that once promised a platform for every calling now offers little more than a lottery ticket. For most, the dream is no longer sustainable. Capital Christian Music Group sits at the heart of the industry's financial web, but its decisions answer to Universal Music Group, the world's largest music corporation. The people greenlighting new worship songs or artist contracts are often far removed from the faith communities these songs are supposed to serve. When a song climbs the CCLI charts, the rewards flow not just to the writers, but to publishers and administrators, most of whom answer to corporate boards. Integrity Music, for example, draws nearly all its church-related revenue, about 97%, from CCCILWIN licensing. That means churches across the country pay annual fees, and those fees are pooled, tracked, and distributed twice a year based on which songs get sung the most. The more a song appears in church reports, the bigger the payout. For some catalogs, CCLY royalties alone can top $100,000 a year, with one dominant song making up nearly 80% of the earnings. The pipeline is tightly managed. Capital Christian Music Group, Essential Music, and Integrity now control almost 80% of the CCLY Top 100. This concentration means publishers have every incentive to push songs that are easy to teach, easy to sing, and easy to replace, because the next quarter's hit will bring in the next round of licensing fees. Breaking into this system is expensive. At major Christian conferences, smaller artists often pay thousands of dollars just for a slot on the showcase stage. Even church worship leaders, especially at megachurches, act as informal scouts, deciding which songs get introduced to their congregations and, by extension, the national charts. The end result is a small group of executives, publishers, and gatekeepers who decide what worship sounds like and who profits when the songs are sung. A single verse from A Mighty Fortress Is Our God contains more doctrine than most modern worship albums combined. Martin Luther's hymn, written in 1529, stacks line after line with concrete claims. God as a bulwark, the defeat of Satan, Christ's victory, the certainty of God's word. 4 verses, each one a compact sermon. By contrast, a typical worship chorus from the past year repeats a handful of phrases, sometimes a dozen times in a row. You are good, you are good, you are good, sung over a swelling pad, with little explanation of what that means or why it matters. The change is not accidental. In 2023, Brandon Lake, one of the most streamed Christian artists, told worship leaders to avoid Christianese, the kind of language that might confuse or exclude people who are not church insiders. He named Holy, Holy, Holy as an example of a song that feels inaccessible. The goal, he said, is to make sure anyone in the room can sing along, even if they have never set foot in a church before. A word count analysis tells the story. Classic hymns average 80 to 120 unique words. The top 10 worship songs on the CCLY chart last year averaged under 35. Repetition ratios have soared. In some cases, a chorus is sung more than 20 times in a single performance. The incentive is clear. Songs that are easy to teach, easy to remember, and easy to license will climb the charts and fill the coffers. But the cost is depth. The more the music aims for universal appeal, the less distinctly Christian it becomes. In 2019, Marty Sampson, one of Hillsong's most influential songwriters, posted that he was genuinely losing his faith, openly wrestling with doctrines he once sang about. The next year, John Steingard of Hawk Nelson announced he no longer believed in God, revealing he had kept silent for years because leaving the industry would destroy his livelihood. Kevin Max, once a voice of DC Talk, identified as ex-evangelical and began exploring universalism. Derek Webb, former frontman of Caedmon's Call, left Christianity and now publicly mocks the faith he once helped shape. Jennifer Knapp, a Grammy-nominated artist, came out as gay and stepped away from evangelical circles. Aaron Gillespie of Underoath and the Almost left the faith, became anti-theist, and later returned to a different kind of belief. George Perdiccas, a founding member of the Newsboys, declared his atheism. These are not obscure names. Their songs shaped youth groups and Sunday mornings for an entire generation. Steingard's admission lands hardest. The industry can trap artists who have lost faith because it has become their primary source of income. Hillsong's global brand unraveled in 2022. Brian Houston resigned after misconduct findings and charges related to covering up his father's abuse. Carl Lentz, once the face of Hillsong New York, was fired for an extramarital affair. Multiple campuses closed. Yet Oceans remains one of the most sung worship songs in America. Bethel Church drew controversy in 2019 when its leaders led public prayers for the resurrection of a worship leader's child, reigniting debates about theology and spectacle. Maverick City Music fractured in 2022, removing Dante Bowe after public statements and social media posts that were at odds with the group's values. As the old guard stumbles, independent artists like Keith and Kristen Getty, Sandra McCracken, and Andrew Peterson build new followings outside the industry machine, funding albums directly through their listeners and reviving hymnody rooted in conviction rather than commerce. Today, Christian music stands at a crossroads, with market share shrinking, core beliefs diluted, and artists questioning what remains. When faith becomes a product, conviction is optional. The future now depends on whether substance can outlast the collapse of spectacle. The test is not popularity, it is faithfulness. What survives will define the next generation.
If you're in need of holiness, if you're in search of righteousness, God's got it, God's got it, God's got it, you know He's got it, God's got it, God's got it. God's people, the city of Zion, yeah. Get it right, get it tight, cause you know that the Lord is coming, yeah. God's people, the city of David, yeah. Can't you see the signs of the time? Everything is changing. Everything is changing. If you're in need of holiness, if you're in search of righteousness, God's got it, God's got it, God's got it, you know He's got it, God's got it, God's got it. Earthquakes in various places, yeah. Wildfire, civil unrest, and the increase in homelessness. While the rich are getting richer, yeah. The poor gets poorer, and the hope of this world doesn't bring happiness. It doesn't bring happiness. If you're in need of holiness, if you're in search of righteousness, God's got it, God's got it, God's got it, you know He's got it, God's got it, God's got it. If you're in need of holiness, God's got it, God's got it, God's got it, you know He's got it, God's got it, God's got it. If you're in need of holiness, if you're in search of righteousness, God's got it, God's got it, God's got it, you know He's got it, you know He's got it, God's got it. If you're in need of holiness, God's got it, God's got it, God's got it, you know He's got it, God's got it, God's got it. If you're in need of holiness, God's got it, God's got it, my Father's got it, you know He's got it, God's got it, God's got it. If you're in need of holiness, you're in search of righteousness, God's got it, God's got it, God's got it, you know He's got it, you know He got it, God's got it, you know He got it.
Hello, everybody. This is Pastor Virgil Pickney of Point 'em to the Cross Ministries, and you're now listening to Bullet and Flight Radio, your story, our station, the best progressive Christian network in the world.
There's a new beat in town. Welcome to Bullet and Flight Music Store, your premier spot for music, books, and one-of-a-kind novelties. Looking to treat yourself or find a unique gift for the music lover in your life? We make it easy. In fact, you can start your collection today for as low as 44 cents. That's right, world-class finds for less than a cup of coffee. Visit us online at bulletinflightmusic.myshopify.com. Plus, keep the conversation going 24/7 with Bullet in Flight Radio on Podbean. Bullet in Flight. Find your rhythm, find your soul.
$100,000 members, 9 campuses across the Dallas-Fort Worth area, $155 million in annual revenue. Gateway Church wasn't just a megachurch, it was an empire. Robert Morris, the founding pastor, was a best-selling author, a spiritual advisor to President Trump, broadcast to millions worldwide. His message was simple: give, and God will bless you. For 2 decades, it worked. Then, June 2024, a woman named Cindy Clemisher came forward. Between 1982 and 1987, when she was 12 years old, Morris, then a married youth pastor in his 20s, sexually abused her. October 2025, Morris pleaded guilty to child sex abuse. Within months, Gateway lost 40% of its donations. Mass layoffs followed, campuses closed. The secret, church elders had known since 2005. They called it restoration. The victim was never contacted. They built an empire on blessing. The foundation was a lie. Gateway Church opened its doors in 2000 in Southlake, Texas, a wealthy suburb northwest of Dallas. Robert Morris, then in his late 30s, launched the church with a handful of families and a clear vision: build something bigger than anyone had seen before. By 2020, Gateway had become one of the 10 largest churches in America. 100,000 members spread across 9 campuses throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex. The main Southlake campus alone featured a 7,000-seat sanctuary, a $60 million facility with stadium seating, massive LED screens, and production values that rivaled concert venues. Weekly attendance across all campuses hit between 25,000 and 30,000, multiple services every Sunday, parking teams directing traffic like stadium events. Inside, in professional worship bands, theatrical lighting, sermons broadcast in high definition to overflow rooms and satellite locations. The scale was staggering, larger than most entertainment venues. More weekly participants than many small towns had residents. But building something this big requires more than vision. It requires cash flow. Constant, massive, predictable cash flow. Gateway's 2023 tax filings showed $155 million in annual revenue. The number represented the culmination of carefully constructed revenue streams, each designed to sustain and expand the empire. Tithes and offerings formed the foundation. 10% of income, the biblical mandate Morris preached relentlessly. With tens of thousands of attendees and middle to upper class demographics in the Dallas suburbs, the math worked powerfully in the church's favor. The book sales added another dimension. Morris's The Blessed Life, published in 2002, became a multi-million copy bestseller. The book's core message, that tithing unlocks God's financial blessing, became Gateway's theological identity. Every new member was encouraged to read it. Small groups studied it. The royalties flowed back to Morris personally. Speaking fees brought Morris 5 figures per appearance at conferences nationwide. Gateway's annual conferences drew thousands, generating ticket revenue, vendor fees, and sponsorships. The staff numbered over 1,000 employees across 9 campuses. Professional management structures, HR departments, marketing divisions, media production teams. By the 2000s, Gateway operated less like a traditional church and more like a multimedia corporation with a spiritual mission. The prosperity message was everywhere. God blesses givers. Give first. Expect abundance. The message was about blessing. The business model required belief. Robert Morris built a brand that extended far beyond Southlake. By 2016, he sat on President Trump's Evangelical Advisory Board, joining a select group of high-profile pastors with direct political access. Media appearances multiplied. TBN broadcast his sermons. His podcast drew millions of downloads. Social media followings reached into the millions. The personal lifestyle raised few questions at the time. Public property records from 2015 showed a home purchase in Southlake exceeding $1 million. Private travel was documented, though Morris didn't own aircraft, designer suits, the trappings of success. Morris consistently framed it as stewardship, not wealth. He took a salary, amount undisclosed due to church tax exemptions, but emphasized he was careful with God's resources. The gap existed, but didn't generate sustained criticism. Luxury paired with "give and God will bless you" teachings created optical tension, but prosperity gospel critiques focused on theology generally, not Morris specifically. Then, 2014, during a sermon series on overcoming the past, Morris publicly discussed a moral failure from his 20s. He called it sexual sin. He said he'd been restored through accountability. Church elders vouched for the process publicly. No specifics were given. The congregation heard adultery, perhaps, a consensual mistake long ago resolved. But what Morris called restoration would later be revealed as something else entirely. June 14, 2024, a woman named Cindy Clemisher, now 54 years old, published detailed allegations on the Wartburg Watch, a Christian accountability blog, and spoke to multiple Christian news outlets simultaneously. The timeline she described: 1982 to 1987. Morris was 21 to 25 years old, a married youth pastor at a church in Oklahoma. Clemisher was 12 to 16. She babysat his child. The abuse, she said, was repeated and continued for years. Morris's initial response, through Gateway, acknowledged a moral failure decades earlier. The church maintained Morris had gone through a restoration process and been held accountable. But the evidence Clemisher provided told a different story. She'd never been contacted during any restoration process. No victim advocacy was involved. No one asked her experience, her trauma, or sought reconciliation. Social media erupted within hours. The Gateway members expressed shock, confusion, anger. Local Dallas news picked up the story by the next day. The question formed immediately: how can restoration occur without the victim's involvement? Biblical reconciliation requires engaging the offended party. Accountability without the abused person isn't accountability. It's concealment with spiritual language. But the church's response was just beginning. Between June 15th and 18th, Gateway's elder board released multiple statements. The messaging evolved rapidly as public pressure mounted. Initially, the elders maintained Morris had been restored through a biblical accountability process. They claimed to have learned of the issue in 2005, 19 years after the abuse ended, and implemented appropriate discipline and oversight. On June 18th, in 4 days after the allegations went public, Morris stepped down from the pulpit. The announcement framed it as voluntary, a decision to allow an independent investigation. The language shifted with each statement. First, moral failure, then, inappropriate relationship. Finally, acknowledging the victim had been a minor. Damage control included hiring an outside investigative firm and promising full transparency. But the timeline discrepancies were already visible. Clemisher provided contemporaneous evidence: journals from the 1980s, therapy records from the 1990s, documenting the trauma. Christianity Today, the Roy's Report, and the Dallas Morning News ran detailed investigations. The story went national within a week. Third-party fact-checkers noted that biblical restoration typically requires victim involvement. The Gateway's process included none, and then the legal process began. July through October 2024 brought cascading consequences. Attendance across Gateway's 9 campuses dropped 20 to 30% within weeks. A criminal investigation opened in Oklahoma, where the abuse began, though statute of limitations questions complicated prosecution. National outlets picked up the story. CNN and NBC covered the megachurch abuse cover-up angle. The narrative shifted from one pastor's sin to institutional failure. Internal documents, later leaked to reporters, revealed the elders had known since 2005. They chose private discipline over public disclosure. Morris continued building Gateway into a national platform while the secret remained contained. Legal experts noted that Oklahoma's mandatory reporting laws in the 1980s were unclear, but by 2005, Texas had clear requirements when credible abuse allegations surface. October 2025, Robert Morris pleaded guilty to child sex abuse charges. The plea deal was sealed due to the victim's age at the time, but the guilty plea itself became public record. But this wasn't the first time Gateway had faced uncomfortable questions. Gateway's financial records, available through 990 tax forms, showed $155 million in revenue for 2023. That figure represented a decline from a peak of approximately $185 million in 2019. Morris's personal compensation wasn't itemized. Churches enjoy broad exemptions from disclosure requirements, but the lifestyle suggested substantial income. The $1.2 million Southlake home, purchased in 2015, visible in public property records. Additional properties linked to Morris family trusts. The prosperity teaching Morris built Gateway on was explicit. The Blessed Life sermon series and book presented tithing as the key to unlocking God's financial blessing. Give 10% minimum, and God will multiply it back. Documented testimonies from former members described pressure to tithe despite personal financial hardship. The message was clear: if you're not experiencing breakthrough, perhaps you're not giving enough. In 2020, Gateway received between $2 and $5 million in PPP loans. According to SBA data, the church had significant cash reserves. The optics were questionable even then. Post-scandal, the financial collapse was swift. By November 2024, Internal Finance Committee notes leaked to reporters suggested donations had dropped 40%. The money was supposed to fund ministry, but ministry requires truth. The theological critiques came swiftly after the scandal broke. Dr. Scott McKnight, a respected New Testament scholar, wrote in Christianity Today that prosperity gospel creates power structures without accountability mechanisms. When financial success is framed as evidence of God's favor, questioning leadership becomes questioning God. Russell Moore, editor of Christianity Today, stated bluntly in July 2024, "This isn't about theology. It's about abuse, enabled by unchecked power." Wade Burleson, a Baptist pastor and advocate for abuse survivors, documented Gateway's governance structure in detail. The elder board was appointed by Morris, not elected by congregation. Decision-making authority concentrated in the founding pastor. No denominational oversight existed. Gateway was independent, self-governed. The restoration without victim problem was fundamentally theological. Biblical reconciliation, as outlined in Matthew 18 and other passages, requires engaging the offended party. Morris's 2014 public confession framed the sin vaguely, letting the congregation assume consensual adult misconduct. The recontextualization was devastating. What the church heard as adultery was actually child abuse. The concealment wasn't just institutional, it was embedded in how the story was told. But the theological failures were symptoms of deeper structural issues. A pattern emerged when the timeline was laid out chronologically. 2005, Gateway's elders learned of the abuse allegations. They chose private discipline, removing Morris from ministry temporarily, implementing accountability structures over public disclosure or victim contact. In 2007 to 2014, Morris rebuilt and expanded Gateway. The church grew from regional to national influence. Revenue climbed. Campuses multiplied. 2014, Morris made a vague public confession during a sermon series on overcoming past mistakes. He called it moral sin in his 20s, claimed full restoration. The congregation accepted it. No media scrutiny followed. 2016, Morris was named to Trump's Evangelical Advisory Board. The appointment brought high-profile validation and access. 2020, Gateway received PPP loans despite significant assets. Minor controversy at the time, recontextualized later as a part of institutional self-preservation. 2024, Clemisher went public. The concealment collapsed. 2025. Morris pleaded guilty to child sex abuse. Each decision to conceal compounded institutional vulnerability. At some point, protecting the ministry became indistinguishable from protecting the abuser. The plea deal was sealed, but the fact of guilt was public record. Callback. Remember that $155 million annual revenue? It was funded by people taught to give sacrificially, while leadership hid the truth. And then, the human cost became impossible to ignore. Cindy Clemisher gave interviews throughout 2024 describing decades of trauma, therapy starting in her 20s, PTSD, the weight of carrying a secret while watching her abuser build a global platform. Her public statement was direct. I was told God would use my pain. I was 12 years old. There was no restoration for me. No one asked how I was. No one sought reconciliation. I watched him become famous while I dealt with the damage. Former Gateway staff members, speaking anonymously to Christian outlets, described a culture of unquestioning loyalty. We were told to trust leadership. Don't ask difficult questions. Submit to authority. Congregants who left after the scandal shared experiences with reporters. We gave everything: time, money, trust. We structured our finances around tithing. We believed the promise of blessing. We were lied to for 20 years. The aftermath brought institutional collapse. Mass layoffs hit in November 2024. The Dallas Business Journal reported 30 to 40% of staff cut. 2 of 9 campuses closed by early 2025. Weekly attendance dropped from 25,000 to 30,000 to an estimated 10,000 to 15,000. The rhetoric had been family. The reality was institutional self-preservation. But Gateway wasn't an isolated case. The entire megachurch model was fracturing. The Hartford Institute for Religion Research defines a megachurch as any Protestant congregation with 2,000 or more weekly attendees. By that standard, Gateway sat in the top tier nationally, but the economic reality is unforgiving. 100,000 members and a $155 million budget meant massive fixed costs. 9 campuses carried mortgages or lease payments. 1,000 staff required salaries and benefits. Production expenses for Sunday services alone ran tens of thousands weekly. The trap is structural. You need crowds to generate revenue. You need spectacle to draw crowds. Spectacle costs money, which requires more revenue, which demands bigger crowds. Gateway's model was personality-driven. Robert Morris was the brand. His teaching, his books, his face on marketing materials. The church's identity was inseparable from the founder. Governance structures concentrated power accordingly. Morris appointed the elder board. He controlled decision-making. No denominational oversight existed to provide external accountability. When the leader falls in this model, the institution faces catastrophic single-point failure. There's no separation between person and brand. Gateway became a case study in systemic vulnerability. One man's sin collapsed a $100 million institution, and Gateway wasn't the first megachurch to collapse under scandal. Mars Hill Church in Seattle dissolved in 2014 after allegations of abusive leadership against founding pastor Mark Driscoll. At its peak, Mars Hill had 15 locations and 13,000 weekly attendees. Within months of the scandal breaking, the entire network shut down. Hillsong Church, the global Pentecostal phenomenon, contracted dramatically between 2020 and 2022, following moral failures by Carl Lentz and financial irregularities involving founder Brian Houston. Campuses closed worldwide. Attendance plummeted. Willow Creek Community Church saw founding pastor Bill Hybels resign in 2018 amid sexual misconduct allegations. The church survived, but diminished significantly in influence and size. Ravi Zacharias International Ministries dissolved in 2020 after posthumous revelations of sexual abuse spanning decades. The pattern repeated: charismatic leader, concentrated power, accountability vacuum, concealed abuse. Protection mechanisms were consistent: loyalty-based boards, non-disclosure agreements, spiritual authority claims that discouraged questioning. When the brand equals the person, then the person's fall destroys the brand instantly. Gateway's Blessed Life brand was Morris. October 2025's guilty plea made the brand radioactive, but maybe the issue wasn't just bad leaders. Gallup data tracking religious attendance shows steady decline since the 1990s, with acceleration after 2020. The pandemic broke weekly church habits for millions. Many never returned. Megachurch-specific data from the Hartford Institute shows growth stalled in the 2000s. By 2020, many large churches were already contracting. Scandals accelerated existing trends. Gateway's post-scandal numbers told the story clearly. 40% donation decrease by November 2024, according to leaked Finance Committee documents. Attendance collapsed from 25,000 to 30,000 weekly to an estimated 10,000 to 15,000 by early 2025. 30 to 40% staff cuts. 2 of 9 campuses closed, with more under review. The symptom extended beyond scandal. Younger generations were leaving institutional religion entirely. Pew Research data from 2023 showed 30% of Americans under 30 identified as religiously unaffiliated. Prosperity gospel became a particularly hard sell when leaders lived luxuriously while concealing abuse. Empty seats were visible in social media photos from Sunday services. Were people leaving Robert Morris or the model itself? Perhaps the real question wasn't about one pastor's sin. By early 2025, Gateway Church still operated, but the empire had collapsed into something much smaller and more fragile. Robert Morris was gone, his guilty plea in October 2025 ending any possibility of return. An interim leadership team managed operations. Megattendance hovered around 10,000 to 15,000 weekly, a 60% drop from peak. The financial situation remained dire. 40% revenue loss forced survival mode cuts. 7 of the original 9 campuses remained open, but consolidation seemed inevitable. The physical infrastructure still stood. Buildings, equipment, systems. A loyal core still attended. Children's programs continued, but the moral credibility was gone. The national influence evaporated. The growth trajectory reversed sharply. Gateway attempted rebranding, trying to separate Gateway Church from Robert Morris's Gateway Church. The effort felt desperate. Victim advocacy groups worked with survivors. Outside investigations continued. Morris's sentencing remained pending, the case sealed due to the victim's age. And compared to 2019, when Gateway ranked in the top 10 U.S. churches, 2025 looked like institutional survival, not thriving ministry. 100,000 members. In 2019, that number meant influence. In 2025, it was a ghost statistic. So what was it all for? The question isn't rhetorical. Thousands of people encountered genuine faith through Gateway over 2 decades. Testimonials exist, lives changed, families restored, hope discovered. Those experiences were real for the people who lived them. The contradiction is equally real. The empire was built on a foundation of concealed child abuse. The leader who preached about God's blessing hid a crime for 40 years. Church elders chose institutional protection over truth. The theological question remains unresolved. Can God's work happen through deeply compromised institutions? Is Gateway's ministry real despite Morris's sin, or fundamentally tainted by the foundational lie? Both narratives have evidence. The truth resists simplification. The human cost was devastating. Clemisher carried 40 years of trauma while watching her abuser achieve fame. Congregants who gave sacrificially felt betrayed at the deepest level. But others found genuine community and transformation. That's complicated, not erased by scandal. The institutional reality is clear. The megachurches concentrate power, create accountability vacuums, and enable abuse when governance fails. The spiritual claim is they're supposed to be different. They built an empire on blessing. Who was blessed? When the foundation is a lie, what happens to everything built on it? The campuses are still there. Some people still gather on Sundays, and services still happen. The machinery continues, diminished but operational. But the thing that filled those spaces, trust in leadership, belief in the message, faith that someone was watching and the institution was safe, that's what October 2025 destroyed. You can't rebuild that with a sermon series or a rebranding campaign. Trust, once shattered at this scale, doesn't reassemble easily, maybe not at all. Gateway Church will either slowly fade or transform into something unrecognizable from its peak. Either way, The empire Robert Morris built is gone. What remains is a question about what we build religious institutions on and who pays the price when the foundation cracks. What do you think should happen to Gateway Church now? Share your thoughts below.
Hello, everybody. This is Catrice from Cocktail Hour with Catrice, and you're listening to Bullet in Flight Radio. Your story, our station, the best progressive Christian network in the world.
I know you.
He's going to work a miracle in your finances. The Lord is getting ready to make a miracle. Make some noise if you're ready for an increase. An increase in your bank account. An increase in your relationships. Can I get an amen?
Christians. I'm not saying I'm not one. I'm saying I mess up. That make me not ever want to be a Christian. Lord, forgive them. They hide behind religion. I want to make an announcement. I'm a believer in Jesus. I believe that he died for my sins. I know that he's a redeemer. My problem is people I should have got saved from, but I heard they were saved. But since the beginning, the Christians been using his name for personal gain. So I know that this sound like it's unrelated, but how do we build up Americans? A group of European settlers came across the water. They was terrorists. They burned down the innocent villages, women and children, and made up a narrative. They said that God told them they were supposed to do it. Now let's make the comparison. Nowadays, nobody murder you under religion no more, and it's scarier. They murder your vision of God, and you start thinking maybe the Lord is a character. Cause it seemed like the evilest people I met was the strongest promoters of Jesus. Cause he died to forgive us of all of our sins, so they used that to cope with the demons. I know an atheist that molested his daughters, but he kept a perfect image. Did it for so many years, and then when he got caught, all of a sudden he turned to Christian. It's never too late, but I just find it funny it wasn't one day that he served in prison. About 30 years doing the same shit. Then he found God in 30 minutes. I know this one pastor molested his daughter. The staff of the church keep on saying forgive him. I know this girl that got raped and her mama wish happy birthdays to the person that did it. I know that Jesus forgave us, but some things I struggle to learn how to work on forgiving. I know a mama who cut off her son for religion. What kind of Jehovah she witnessed? This one girl I changed my ways with, convinced herself that I cheated. She said she had confirmation from the spirit, stopped picking up calls for no reason. She got romantic with one of my closest homies less than 30 days while I was grieving. He ain't know that I knew he called me, I confronted him and he gon' blame it on Jesus. He said God told me this was my wife. Well, she told me he said I'm her husband. So which one was God? Which one of y'all lied? Be honest, I find it disgusting. And I know a pastor that took a donation and went bought his wife a new Lexus. You know you was supposed to take that and upgrade the facility. Why you finessing? The worst type of Christians, the ones that believe that they talking to God when it's really ambition. Convincing themselves that it's genuine, trying to block out the hidden agendas. And they play on the hearts of the Christian beginners with hallelujahs and they memorize scriptures. Made me gullible cause it was convincing. God, I need you to come fix me. I don't want to give up believing cause I still remember all of the times that you helped me and saved me when I ain't deserve it cause I'm still a sinner. It's just that all of the Christians you sent me that I got to witness, they always pretenders. All of them wicked. And for the life of me, I just don't see why I gotta forgive them. Need you to heal me, God. I know you real. That's why I'm on my knees begging. Isaiah 29, verse 13. I just wish I would've read it. He said they honor me with their lips, but their hearts so far from me. Father, please protect me from Christians. Not saying I'm not one, I'm saying I mess up. That make me not ever wanna be.
Of my might, you don't.
I follow God, but I will never ever follow Christians.
I'm in the midst. I put the three of you together because he said that a three, can you get it out, Father?
Lord, forgive them.
With me right now, Father, speak.
They hide behind religion.
Thank you, Jesus.
I can't make that up, bro.
You can't make it up because I have been through the same thing.
There's a new beat in town. Welcome to Bullet in Flight Music Store, your premier spot for music, books, and one-of-a-kind novelties. Looking to treat yourself or find a unique gift for the music lover in your life? We make it easy. In fact, you can start your collection today for as low as 44 cents. That's right, world-class finds for less than a cup of coffee. Visit us online at bulletinflightmusic.myshopify.com. Plus, keep the conversation going 24/7 with Bullet in Flight Radio on Podbean. Bullet in Flight. Find your rhythm, find your soul.
Bullet in flight, fly. Bullet in flight, fly. Bullet in flight, bullet in flight. Bullet in flight, fly. Bullet in flight, fly.